Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 355 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. The borage has been swathed somewhat earlier this year than previously, so it's time to bring home the honey crop, and my mind turns to the autumn treatments. But which one to choose from? There are so many. Listen in to hear my pick and why. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is brought to you, in part, by Hive 5 Multi-Guard. So,
when you need a little peace of mind that your bees are safe from dangers of all kind, pesticides, hornets, wasps and mice are no match for Hive 5. The Hive 5 Multi-Guard is the best one in town. Keeps your bees safe all year round. The ultimate solution has been found. It's Hive 5.
The Hive 5 Multi-Guard fits nearly all beehives and makes beekeeping much easier. Hive 5.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast, and in today's podcast I'm discussing the current wasp epidemic, if indeed that's what we're experiencing. A look at the borage crop situation and how we intend to bring home the honey crop, and a review of the autumn Varroa treatments that I've been considering and why I've picked the one that I have. Well now, another week zooms by in our short and sweet beekeeping season, although right now things are not looking so sweet, as we appear to be plagued by high numbers of wasps, and with the nectar flow drying up as rapidly as it has, it feels somewhat like the end of the season has arrived earlier than most previous recent years. First up, I wanted to add some context to the wasp situation. I've seen lots and lots of reports about the current perceived wasp problem. The huge numbers of wasps, as it has been described, is most likely down to the early warm and dry spring, followed by those heatwave conditions that we've had on and off all summer long, combined with very dry conditions, and it all builds into very favourable conditions for our wasp populations. Our common wasp, Vespula vulgaris, being a social insect, builds large nests and, given the warm conditions, behave in a very similar way to our honeybees. I'm sure everyone, well, most everyone, enjoyed the early start to the beekeeping season. Overwintered colonies growing fast in the warm spring conditions, and it's no different for other social insects such as wasps, hornets, bumblebees and ants. It should come as no surprise, with all of these insects coming from the same scientific classification order of Hymenoptera, that when one family does well, that most of the others will also do very well too. Without getting too sciencey, most wasps fall into the family Vespidae, ants are in the family Formycidae, and our honeybees Apidae, but all coming from the larger order of Hymenoptera means they share quite a lot in common. Thus, if one does particularly well in an active season, the others are likely to also do nicely. Thank you very much. For instance, over at the fishing lakes, it's noticeable that wasps are lurking around the apiaries in fairly large numbers, certainly larger than last year. But also, I've seen an awful lot of ant mounds. I wouldn't go so far as to call them ant hills, but it is noticeable that there are a lot of them around. Warmer weather means they're able to build larger nests and get out foraging in greater numbers, in whatever shape that foraging might take. Now, when we think about the current wasp situation and combine that with the nectar flow drying up earlier, it puts wasps in the same position as our honeybees, large colonies of adult insects all looking for a food source. Obviously, there are differences. between our honeybees and the wasps, hornets and ants, but fundamentally they're all just out looking for food, and if there's an easy meal, they'll take it. In thinking about wasps, remember, they're a very helpful insect to have around, and for the most part, we hardly ever see them. It's only when food becomes scarce and us beekeepers inadvertently allow sometimes easy access into our hives and apiaries and the food stores within that we suddenly think we have a major wasp problem. I can easily illustrate this situation with my own colonies, both nukes and full-size hives, and actually it has impacted on my plans for the rest of the summer and autumn. We all know that strong colonies can easily fight off wasps, hornets and other robbing honeybees. Okay, before I get a pile of messages that the yellow-legged, yellow-faced Asian hornet is an exception, I accept that there are grey areas that we need to tackle, but for the most part, let's just go with the simpler view that a strong colony can and will fight its corner, and most predators will sensibly go looking somewhere else. If you have a strong colony, or many strong colonies, you'll probably be scratching your head and asking why everyone seems to think there's a wasp epidemic when you're not really seeing many wasps at all. Well done you is what I say. The wasps are out there, but because you have healthy, strong colonies, you're not being picked on. As a result, the wasps just don't linger in your apiary, and you see far less than other beekeepers. As you might expect, I have a mix of colonies and nukes, all with varying levels of strength and size. I'm really, actually, quite pleased to say they're all looking really healthy. We've not seen any issues with Varroa this year as yet, but more on that in a few minutes. The challenge has come with the many splits that I've performed this year in order to grow our colony numbers back up to the level I want in order to provide nukes for sale and still have a good number of production colonies for a reasonable honey crop. These splits inevitably had some stronger colonies than others, and although we've had a very successful year introducing caged queens, several of the smaller nukes have been slower to build up their population of adult worker honeybees. Now, add into this scenario the weather, hot and dry, very favourable conditions for these nukes to build up. That's a nice positive, but on the downside, the available forage has been reduced and curtailed by the early end of most nectar sources. Next, we introduce wasps into the apiary and the fight to survive begins. Each of the larger nucleus colonies has bees aplenty, enough adults to carry out all of the tasks a full-size colony would perform. The important one here is guard duty at the entrance. Some of our nucleus colonies are so large now that they have a permanent sentry post outside the entrance, consisting of maybe 20 or 30 adult bees, just milling around waiting for anything that shouldn't be there to land and approach. Enter stage left, the wasp. As soon as it lands and approaches the entrance, several bees approach it, detect that it's an intruder, and look to force it away. The wasp, spotting it could get into serious trouble quickly, takes to the wing, has a couple of additional half-hearted attempts to get in, but then decides there must be easier ways to get a meal, and flies off. This little scenario repeats over and over and over again, both at this nucleus colony entrance, but also at all of the other entrances in my apiary. Until eventually, of course, the wasp finds one of our smaller population nucleus colonies. Now it has a chance of a free meal without the risk of losing its life. No guard bees at the entrance because they're all busy doing something else, tending larvae, storing food resources, out foraging, maintaining the core temperature of the brood nest. So many jobs and so few bees to help out in this slightly smaller colony. The wasp gets her meal, then back out of the hive, heads home to her nest and reports back. Soon, many more wasps descend on our poor little nucleus colony, and it just becomes overwhelmed. Actually, I've just found another one at the paddock apiary in just this situation, and it's also coming home to the garage roof with me. But if you have an apiary full of strong, well-populated hives and nukes, you'll likely not see many wasps. One or two having a go at the entrances, which of course you've reduced down to just a few millimetres, and they're easily chased away by your bees. These wasps head off to find another food source. Maybe it's someone having a picnic, or maybe it's another beekeeper's apiary with weaker colonies, and they're the ones complaining of a wasp epidemic this year. My top tips for keeping your bees safe this year are really fairly straightforward. Reduce entrances now if you haven't done so already. Let the bees fight off any intruders that might come their way. Feed fondant instead of syrup to reduce the excitement around that hive, as bees and wasps alike detect the syrup and go into a feeding frenzy. Unite smaller colonies that can no longer defend themselves. Unite them with larger ones and look to have a strong colony through the winter, allowing you to split them early in the spring. And of course, use traps to distract wasps away from your hives. Now, I know not everybody will want to use traps, but they do serve a purpose at this time of the year in our apiaries. In other news, and as I said in the introduction, the borage is done. All over for another year, and I think possibly as close to a failed crop as we've ever encountered on the clay soils of Essex. I obviously had the failed borage crop a few years ago, but that was a completely different scenario with no irrigation and on sandy soil. The clay soils of Essex always retain some moisture, well, almost always. This year has been tricky. I think the very early heat caused the plants to flower prematurely, maybe as much as a fortnight or 3 weeks early. This then had a knock-on effect with the plants being fully flowered and over by the time I came back from the USA. Well, that's a distant 2 weeks ago now. So it's time to bring the honey crop home. Who knows what we'll have? I certainly gave the colonies far more space than they needed, so at least we've not been caught out with a huge quantity of honey and swarming colonies. As my game plan was to take only very strong colonies to the borage, we've survived any wasp issues there, as I mentioned previously. And popping back to reduce the entrances last week will have made a huge difference in their vulnerability. So it's clearer boards on and a trailer load, or more likely a trailer half load, to bring back next week, and then extraction. I'll document the process on video for you, so do look out for those next week. And that brings me on to the topic of treatments for Varroa and what I plan to do this year. It can really seem like there are so many Varroa treatments available, and of course, specifically for you beginner beekeepers, it can all be very confusing. So here's my take on what I'm going to use and why. Breaking the various treatment types down over the years, I've settled on probably just 3 or 4 that have shown themselves to work really well for me. Oh, and just to say, this year I'm using Apivar. I'll come back to that one. I didn't want to prolong the choice like they do in those reality TV game shows. And the person leaving us this week is, pause for what seems like an absolute eternity, Stewart. Anyway, Apivar is my choice, but let me mention a couple of others that we've used in recent years that you might also want to consider. Remember, it's useful to vary the treatment types that you use each year. Sticking with just one type of treatment can be problematic in some instances by creating resistance in the Varroa population, so it's good to change it up each time. Firstly, as it's my treatment of choice this year, Apivar. This comes in a pack of 2 strips that hang between the frames. The active ingredient is called amitraz, and there's 500 milligrams of active substance on each strip. So this is a product that cannot be used when there's a honey flow coming in. So it's best used at the end of the season, like now, when you've taken off the honey and preparing your bees for the autumn and winter. Of course, it can be used at any time, but just bear in mind, if you want honey production from the target colony, you can't use this treatment at the same time. Apivar is best used with single brood boxes. The recommendations are such that the manufacturers advise against using it with double brood systems. I find this treatment the gentlest of all the products available, and the bees generally just move out of the way when you first insert the strips, but otherwise there's no mass panic to get away from it, as often happens with other products. The strips are placed directly in the brood nest area, so we carry out an inspection, identify where the middle of the brood nest is, and hang the strips in seams with a 2-seam gap between them. Remember, the brood nest area is going to contract as we head into the autumn, so you want the position to be somewhere in the middle. The strips have a hole for a pin, but also a convenient V shape cut into the strip, which can be folded back and used to support the strip. But I do find this tends to push the strip closer to one side than the other, so my preference is a drawing pin, if I can find them. These strips can be left in the brood box for as many as 10 weeks, but for most colonies that are down to small brood areas, a 6-week period is perfectly acceptable and very effective. This means if the treatment goes in at the beginning of August, it could stay in there until the 2nd week of October. Being in there for so long, sometimes the bees will build wax or put propolis on the strips, but this can be simply and safely scraped off with a hive tool and the strips replaced back into the brood box. It also allows for the strips to be repositioned if you so wish. All in all, a really effective and easy to use treatment. Other options out there that we've used recently include the thymol-based Api-Life Var. This has been very effective and again, very simple to use. The treatment is a mix of thymol, eucalyptus, camphor and levomenthol. All of these are impregnated into thin green foam sponge rectangles that are a bit like the oasis blocks used by flower arrangers. Again, not to be used during a honey flow. Same rules apply as for Apivar. The packet contains 2 strips, and one of these is placed in either 2 or 4 corners, cut or broken into smaller pieces, that surround the brood area, unlike Apivar, which is placed directly in the brood area. The hive is closed, and after 7 days the treatment is repeated using the 2nd strip from the first packet. The following 2 weeks the process is repeated, so you'll need 2 packets per hive for the full 4-week treatment. I like this treatment, and as I say, it is relatively quick, taking just 4 weeks. One of the most well-known treatments must be ApiGuard. This has been around for over 20 years now and is a trusted treatment for many beekeepers. The treatment consists of a foil tray containing a gel with thymol in it, sealed with a foil peel-back lid. Again, not for use during a honey flow. In a similar fashion to the Api-Life Var, the treatment is used over a 4-week period, requiring 2 trays of treatment. The foil is peeled back from the container, exposing the gel, and placed centrally over the brood nest area. You do need to leave a gap above the tray, so an eek or something similar works really well to provide that gap. After 2 weeks, the first tray is removed and replaced with a second tray. It's a simple and effective treatment to use, and one that has worked well for me in the past. Next week, I'll look at some of the other treatments available and talk some more about the routine of integrated pest management and how it can save you the pain of losing a colony over the autumn and winter period. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company.